Are you ready to unlock your full potential and maximize your productivity? Look no further than Productivity Smarts, the ultimate audio podcast hosted by renowned productivity expert Gerald J. Leonard. In every episode, Gerald shares captivating stories, invaluable tips, and cutting-edge strategies that will transform the way you approach productivity. Whether you're looking to reduce stress, overcome overwhelm, or simply get more done in less time, Productivity Smarts has got you covered. But that's not all. You'll also gain inspiration from real-life success stories of individuals who have achieved greatness through productivity. Plus, you'll learn the latest tools, techniques, and habits that will help you achieve a new level of happiness and fulfillment in your personal and professional life. So why wait? Join us every week as we delve into the exciting world of productivity and help you unleash your full potential. Get ready to take your productivity to the next level with Productivity Smarts. As a productivity expert and host of the Productivity Smarts podcast, Gerald J. Leonard has been a proud supporter of Kiva since 2011. Kiva is a non-profit organization that helps entrepreneurs in third world countries access the capital they need to start or grow their businesses. By making a small loan through Kiva, you can help these entrepreneurs achieve their dreams, support their families, and contribute to their local economies. And with a repayment rate of over 96%, your loan can be re-lent to another entrepreneur once it's repaid, creating a ripple effect of positive change. So if you're looking for a meaningful way to make a difference in the world, consider making a loan through Kiva. With loans as small as $25, anyone can be a micro-lender and help change lives. Visit kiva.org to learn more and start lending today.
Well, today I am speaking to someone very special. His name is Dave Brown. He's a really good friend of mine, but he and his brother Danny are super smart. They're actually identical twin authors who have come together and created this book called Identical Opposites. Find Your Voice and Speak. Equipped with decades of public speaking and leadership development experience, together they guide professionals and creatives to break free from the shadows, claim their individual voice, and build speak-up cultures where authenticity thrives. Dave, man, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for the invitation. It's good to see you as always. Thrilled to be able to spend some time with you today.
Excellent, man. Well, I am so happy to have you on the show and for us to get to talk again. I know you and Danny had me on your podcast, and things have been going really, really well with the podcast here. And when I saw your new book, I was like, dude, I got to send you a note and say, you didn't even reach out to me. I just reached out to you and said, I got to be on the podcast to talk about your new book. And I had a chance to go through it, and man, it is a wealth of knowledge and insight, because as you guys are identical twins, you're very different, and you have a different slant in the way you look at life, but you also are encouraging each other and challenging each other to be your best. And you guys have done some amazing work together and individually. And so let me ask you my first question before we get into the meat of our conversation here. And that is, what is your favorite style of music?
Well, I could say jazz because I know that's up your experience, what you're good at. I could go with the John Coltrane, Miles Davis, but the truth of the matter is I'm a Motown baby. I grew up Motown, love Motown, Four Tops, you name it. That's my favorite genre music. Now, when I was in college as a young single, getting married, I got into the Boys to Men, Jodeci, that type of style, but I am still at my core a 70s Motown. That is who I am through and through.
Excellent. Well, there's nothing wrong with that. Motown's really good. I love Motown as well. And so, but who's one of your favorite artists, or do you have a favorite song?
I've got quite a few. Obviously, Marvin Gaye, You Can't Go Wrong.
No, you can't go wrong with Marvin.
Classics. I love Marvin Gaye, the most beautiful voice, Ain't No Mountain High. You think about just getting going, whether it's in the morning, you're going to be on stage. That could be one of the songs you could use, right? The Four Tops, Supremes. That's the stuff that I love to listen to, and the stuff that my dad would put on with the vinyl albums.
Yeah.
And so for me, I would say Marvin Gaye is my favorite, but Stevie Wonder, of course, has always been one of my favorites. But the entire, spectrum of Motown, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that tip you gave in the book too, because it's like, hey, if you're going to get up and speak, have something that's going to pump you up. Because, basically when you think about the professional athletes, right, it's like they go out there for their pre-game warm-up, but they have their headphones on and they are just in the moment getting prepared. And, for me, I've had the opportunity of writing a book with him and then learning from him, Les Brown. And so whenever I speak, I will spend the day before and that morning just listening to Les Brown. And I kind of have what I'm going to say, and I'm prepared, but man, does he get me really focused and fired up and focused the way I'm going to deliver on what is it that I want people to walk away with. And as Les would say, I want you to feel me, right? I want you to hear me, but I want you to feel what I'm trying to say here. And so, yeah, that's my go-to when it comes to getting prepared to speak.
Well, one of the best for sure.
Yeah, he really is. Now, you guys have written an amazing book, Identical Twins. And tell me how you come up with the idea for writing that. Obviously, you're identical twins, but but tell me how did you come up with the idea and what motivated you to put this together?
Right. That's a great question. Thank you so much for asking that, Gerald. For the two of us, we are corporate trainers. A lot of our work are with organizations, managers, senior executives. And some of the things that we gather from our surveys, from our times with the leaders, are how do we continue to strengthen our speak up culture? Or how do we get the best out of our employees so they can be more productive, more effective? And from that gathering, what we've realized is that sometimes people can get lost in their position or lost in their responsibilities and not find their individual gifts and talents. And it just made sense for us to make that connection. Here we are, identical twins, but we really are so different in our interests and our passions and our strengths. And then we've also found that there may be, let's say, 4 or 5 different division managers, all same titles, but all have different functions, all different gift sets. So how do we help them to find their voice? How do we help them to find their strengths and bring those strengths to light in order to help the company become more profitable? That's where we came together and said, this is what we need to focus on. I think what's interesting also, Gerald, is that through some of the studies and research, we found that through one of the research findings was that 95% of employees, they struggle just to be able to speak and share their voice and opinions. Sometimes there's that fear. So we said, look, I'm not afraid to be who I am with my twin. I'm not afraid to be able to tell people I'm not him. But at the same time, we know that there are people that are in that positions in the organizations where they feel fearful to speak up. And that is why we put this book together.
Yeah, no, that makes so much sense. And I think it's going to help a lot of people because you had a story there where you had a really good employee in your company that was afraid to speak up. And, you guys got in and you didn't just put a Band-Aid on it, right? And I think sometimes as managers or leaders, we can tend to give people Band-Aids and just kind of say a couple of things, but you got in and had a deep conversation and help them to uncover why and talk out why he was feeling that way. And it was from past embarrassment or something that he said and didn't agree with them. And so he felt like, okay, that's not what you do. And you guys were able to help him to overcome that and begin to speak up. Let me ask you this. In the book, you guys talk about this twin experience and the challenge for individual identity. How does that translate for other individuals in the workplace for around workplace productivity when people feel, as we're talking now, about they feel or seem unseen or overshadowed, right? They're just kind of in the back shadows, but they have some of the best ideas.
Yeah, I think the challenge that we found is that, people who go through the rhythm or the routine, have their one-on-ones, go to the certain group or the team meetings, and yet they still feel like they're being overshadowed or that their skill set isn't being looked upon, or maybe they're not an extrovert and they're not very animated in how they express themselves. So they could tend to feel as if they're being overshadowed.
Right.
What Dan and I try to do, we bring in what we call our style to our trainings is be very honest and real. Danny is by nature more of an introvert, or we call it ambivert. And I am very extreme in terms of my thoughts and ideas. I'm not shy in it. But what we found is that if we get people to understand that there's value that could come from every member of the team, but you let them shine. You let them speak first. You let them flesh out their ideas and thoughts. And then you act in a position where you're curious and you're asking more questions because you want them to bring everything out that they're thinking.
Right.
Then and only then do you add your 2 cents, because maybe you don't need to add your 2 cents.
Yeah.
But what that does, it opens them up to where they're not going to be afraid if you continue with that pattern. And there's where you can get all the collection of ideas. And so what Dan and I've learned, even with each other, we found that if there's an area that I'm quote unquote responsible for, then that's where I take the lead and he plays secondary.
Yeah.
And he flushes all of my ideas, everything I'm thinking, and then he adds his thoughts. Or if he's taken a project, which is something we've done recently with an organization in Ohio, he's running it. He's running point, and I'm only adding my thoughts after we've thoroughly exhausted everything he might be thinking, everything he's learned from gathering insight from speaking with the executive directors there, and then I add my 2 cents.
Yeah.
And we feel like if we're able to show that example, then a lot of these leaders and these organizations can find their lane or find their voice within that,
right,
and then start to speak up themselves.
That's a really great way of looking at it too. And one of the things I've learned to add to that is when you're leading project teams is because of technology, we can tend to get away from this, but I love Post-it notes when it comes to meetings. And I found one of the things to do is to, if you have a brainstorming, before you ask people to share, get people to write down 2 or 3 ideas on the Post-it note and then put them on the board and have the person who put them on the board share their idea. That way, if you have somebody who's really shy, they're fine with writing it down. And then you get them to permission to stand up and share their idea. They end up having some of the best ideas.
They do. Yes.
Right? They have some of the best ideas. And if you can create a way where in the beginning, because there's always, and sometimes it's not that the person's trying to dominate the meeting, it's just their personality.
Yeah.
Right? And they will always speak up and they will always voice their opinion and so on and so forth. And then everybody else feels like, okay, well, so-and-so said something and they're in this position, they're in this role, and I report to them, so I can't say anything now.
That's so true. The thing that I've also learned in, I would say, implementing this training recently is when you share the concept of you've got to become an entrepreneur in your own mind. So we call it entrepreneurship. So with that in mind, if you're the person where the buck stops, what would you do? How would you move the organization forward? And when they start to feel that sense of ownership, then you're getting this collection of ideas and you're getting this sense of we're going to do even more. But I love the thought of Post-it notes. I love the idea of saying, hey, let's just go ahead and put in a couple of ideas or our thoughts of where we go, put it on the wall and say, hey, who shared this brilliant idea?
Exactly.
Let's run with this for a minute, right? I love that because it doesn't signal anybody out. It doesn't make them feel like they can't share. So, Gerald, that's a brilliant idea. I'm going to definitely steal that one.
Yeah, no, I like, like I said, this is a great conversation. And again, we've known each other for years. Let me ask you this, for professionals and creatives alike, what's a practical first step when someone, discovers to help them discover their authentic voice and speak up more confidently?
The thing that comes to my mind, Gerald, with that question is what resonates with you? We hear about a lot of things around the water cooler. We hear things all the time in the office, but there's something that continues to resonate in your mind. If it comes up over and over again, you would need to hone in on that like a radar. That's where you need to focus your attention, because somewhere in you, you're passionate about it, or somewhere in you, you feel indignant or you feel excited about it.
Yeah.
Well, that part of enthusiasm, which is what part of the framework, that's what you need to focus on. And when you get excited about something or you feel passionate about something, then you're going to start to develop the sense of how do I speak to that? Or how do I bring that to light? So the thing I would encourage all those who are out there listening to this podcast or reading my book is to focus on the things that excite you the most, or things that seem to come up over and over and over again, because it may not be the same thing that comes up for your teammate or your peer, but it does for you.
Right.
And when that does, that's when you start to put together the plan, use the framework in order to speak up.
Yeah. Now, the framework you're talking about is called the Speak framework. And I like that because it's like you can just, speak is one of those 5-letter words that you can look at your hand and go SPEAK, right? What is that framework and how could someone use that framework? And maybe just walk us through an element of it to show us how we can tangibly put this into practice and get an outcome from it.
I'm so glad you said that, Gerald. The thing that I encourage people to do is keep it simple.
Yeah.
I was a keynote at a conference last month in Phoenix, Arizona, and we had everybody at the very end of the presentation literally getting up and they're giving each other high fives. You don't have to be on the Dallas Cowboys, but when they score a touchdown, you get excited. You're giving everybody a high five around you.
Exactly.
And what excitement comes when you hear your peers, you hear the people that you're leading, they find their voice and they get excited. You want to give each other high fives. So we get in a 5 kind of a finger hand framework. And the first one is the C. What's the goal of it? You want to gain perspective.
Yeah.
This is where you start to understand, how do I see this picture? What do I see that's going on? Why do I need to speak to that? That's what you got to do. First of all, you got to see the situation for what it is.
Yeah.
Secondly, you got to make preparation. The more you prepare, gathering data, evidence, gathering situations, scenarios, knowing how to be able to point to something. So it's not about you just being emotional. You're pointing to something that's factual.
Right.
So you got to see it. You got to prepare for it. You got to have enthusiasm, because if you're not excited about it, why should we be excited about it?
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
It matters to me, but it doesn't matter to anybody else. Well, it doesn't matter to you. The fourth thing is get allies. Sometimes you may not find the strength in your own, but you can find strength through other leaders.
Yeah.
People who've done it, or people who have a little bit more credibility or standing in the company can be able to say, Dave, I know how to help that, or I'd be able to speak my voice to that as well.
Right.
And then lastly, you got to just keep preaching intentionally. What does this mean? Once you find your voice to say something, that courage to speak out, the courage to speak up, now you got to keep doing it over and over again so that you develop that muscle, right? So you go to develop that sense of consistency, and then it becomes normal in that environment to where you actually have a healthy speak up culture.
I love the idea of the framework, and you really spell it out throughout the book. You give really practical examples. And I also love the fact that you guys have done a lot of research, because you talk about neuroscience, you talked about practical things that you've learned and examples. And so, it's a meaty book, right? It really is. And I love books like that. I love talking with people who've done their homework on a topic that they've lived, but also that they can refer to science-based, peer-reviewed evidence to show that this principle can work universally, right? Can work universally. I love all the letters. I really like the A, the idea of advocating or alliances, because to me, and some of the examples you gave was how you and your brother help each other in that way. I think one of you guys were in college and was kind of beginning to kind of lay back a little bit. And the other one called the other one up and says, hey, what are you doing? You need to go get a job.
Right. That was my twin and I were talking about that. Danny had just finished his undergrad in a physics and electrical engineering. Mechanical engineering major. Yeah. And he had 3 months before he started his MBA program at Ball State. And I said, Dan, what are you doing laying around the house? Get up and go get a job. Stay active. Keep your brain moving. And he thought, well, it's time for me to relax. I said, no, it's time for you to keep going. And so he was willing to let me give him a little kick in the backside a little bit there. Yeah. But we do that to each other all the time, just to make sure we're staying on course. And that's really having a true ally, someone who knows you enough to speak the truth, but they know you enough to know when to give you that push and when to back off and let you make those decisions and do those things on your own.
This question just came to me as we're talking about this. We're in a time right now with AI, with all of the, we've gotten past the government shutdown, but a lot of people have lost their jobs. They didn't think they were going to be losing their jobs. AI is like hit the large, IT organizations really big, where certain skills now, even at a very high level, are being replaced by AI and things like that. And then you still got globalization, you got the economics of the environment, you got the atmosphere. There's some people out there really hurting, and they are educated, they're smart, they got a good educational background, and they just find themselves in a place. How can the speak framework help them as they're, looking up at the bottom of the well where they've kind of been pushed down into, and they got to figure out how to climb themselves up out of that, because we've been there before.
Oh my goodness.
Climb ourselves out of that. But that's why I use that analogy. It's like you look up, you're like, oh, okay, I got a little ways to go. How can I use the Speak framework to help me get out of that situation and move forward?
Sometimes you got to have some self-talk too, where you're actually speaking to yourself. But let me share this, Gerald, from our perspective, because my twin and I, our primary lane, or the area that we focus on primarily more than anything else, is the tech sector. Most of our clients are from technology.
Yeah.
And what we try to help them understand is you've got to learn to communicate your value differently now.
Yeah.
What makes you so invaluable that we know that AI, even as much as we're seeing technology advance and progress, it cannot replace certain aspects of the human element.
Yeah.
And you've got to show yourself to be so valuable to an organization that they have to keep you on, or they have to bring you on. Yeah. Whether it's the ability to be able to say, I know how to translate and communicate those type of advancements in your organization or in your position, your framework. Or it could also be, let me speak to the people that I have in my network. They know who I am. They know my experience. They know what I could bring. And this is where you may have to leverage your network unlike you've ever done before. It's not just about how many people you have in your LinkedIn network. No, it's about how few that you have when you could pick up a phone. They say, Dave, I've got you. Yeah. Or I can help you. And I think that's where we are now, because people are being reactive. Yeah. Eventually you're going to see that cool down, not the advancement of technology, but the overreaction to technology. Yeah. And people are going to realize, hey, there's still a need for certain type of leaders. At the same time, when we say C in terms of the framework, Gerald, this might be where you have to say, is there a skill I should go after a little bit more? Yeah. Should I harness this? Whether it's going on our learning platform or going somewhere else, maybe you have an account with LinkedIn Learning, or you have an account somewhere else. There might be a skill or trait that I can hone in on. Yeah. This might be the time to do that.
Yeah, no, it's really smart. And I think as learners and listeners of Productivity Smarts, it's all about continuous lifelong, right? And over the last year, if you go and glean and look at my LinkedIn profile, I've taken a number of AI courses or programs that are somewhat year long or 16 weeks at a time, but from different universities at the same time, because I've focused on accelerated learning for one. And then here's what I learned from taking AI classes from places like Johns Hopkins, Kellogg, University of Chicago, Chief Artificial Intelligence Officer, is that AI is a computer system. It deals with ones and zeros, right? Even with the neural network that we don't really know what's in the black box, it's still ones and zeros. Here's where we as human beings are different.
Yes.
We have an electrical system called the meridian system, right? That deals with ones and zeros. What that electrical system does, it then turns all of those ones and zeros into neural chemicals. And so we're able to see the nuances of things, or have compassion or empathy, or relate to stories, or create things that no matter how advanced AI gets, it can only handle zeros and ones. It doesn't have oxytocin, dopamine, serotonin, all those other neurochemicals that give us the nuances of being human. And so if we learn how to leverage what we've been given, no matter how advanced AI gets, we can figure out, I can use AI to do the left brain stuff, analytics, but the right brain, creativity, compassion, connection, that's human. And AI can never replace that.
They can't. You're so true. That's so true, Gerald. And this is where we got to help them to understand. It's not just about how many degrees you have, your depth of experience. It's about bringing who you are, your whole authentic self, to that role, to that environment. That's going to be the defining factor. And I think if you can understand that, that's where the difference is going to come in, because there's not going to be that sense of empathy. If you only make decisions based on, okay, this is the numbers, this is what you're going to get out of your people here, this is what you're going to get out of your people there, and you're just laying everybody off, when in reality, you might be letting a diamond in the rough go because you didn't do your job as a manager, as a leader, to figure out, what do I have in the people I have already in-house?
Exactly.
And that's why in the book, Gerald, I have at the very back a section for HR, COOs, L&D directors called the compass. If you can learn to use your compass to navigate the waters right now, the choppy waters, what do you want to call it? But you're trying to get to a destination, you're going to look at your people with this compass as a guide, and then you'll be able to determine, how do I bring the best out of them? How do I set them up for success? And how do I make sure I'm taking advantage of who they are so that they can be in the best position to use AI effectively?
Yeah, exactly. Now, let me ask you, from your experience, let's talk about vulnerability, speaking up with uncertainty, because sometimes we're in a situation, the organization's tense, and we feel like we are onto something and we can share it, but we feel vulnerable. We feel uncertain that, hey, if I speak up in the wrong way, they might not like that. They may want to let me go. But how can we speak up in uncertainty and be productive and see it as a productivity asset versus liability?
I love that question, Gerald. I'm so glad you asked it. Here's the thing I would say. You have to be consistent. And this is part of the last aspect of keep preaching intentionally. That's your KPI.
Yeah.
The more you show up, the more you're going to be received in that manner. And here's the thing that's so important about it. When they see me as someone being consistent, it doesn't matter what I say let me frame it. It may not matter as much as to what I say. It's the fact that I'm saying it and they want to hear it.
Yeah.
But I'll put it this way. There have been a lot through our research of especially lower entry or someone who hasn't been at an organization for a long period of time, where there is that fear of, I could be reprimanded, I could lose my job, or I could be written up.
Right.
What we encourage people to do is learn about different behavioral models yourself. It doesn't matter, Myers-Briggs, DISC, figure out the people on your team. What is your manager like? What's your direct report like? See how they like to receive information, and then learn the pattern, how you report to them, how you share things. And when you do it consistently in that way, when you do bring up those areas where you're not seeing the things you want to see, or bring up the areas that you feel can help the organization grow, then they're going to receive it differently.
Yeah.
Because not everybody's going to see it the same way. And so that's something I learned from being an identical twin. Danny and I are much different. I like to talk things out. Let's flesh it out. We'll get through it at the very end. Dan's like, no. We don't have time for all that. Sometimes we need to do this and that's it. Or what's your idea? Let's just run with it, right? And so we've got to figure out how that recipient or our hearer will receive that information. And that's when we show up. If you could do that, then you're going to be able to stay authentic and stay true to yourself.
Yes.
That to me is why it's so important, because you don't want to lose yourself. I'm not my identical twin brother, but at the same time, I know that I can have the same impact and effectiveness that he has the ability to be, if I'd learned to stay consistent in knowing my voice, knowing who I am. But even better, if I know the people I'm speaking with and addressing, how they might receive my information.
Yeah, it reminds, as you're talking, this quote from a book, Mahal Kasa. He wrote a book called Let's Get Real and Let's Not Play, right? One of the ideas in the book was intent counts more than technique.
Nice.
Right? In other words, as I'm being my KPI, keep on preaching, being consistent, sharing my message, if my intent is to sincerely help the organization move forward, then that will come through more than the technique that I use. Now, I need to be wise, as you're saying, and I really appreciate that we use the models of behavior, Myers-Briggs, DISC, and so on, to understand ourselves and to understand others and communication strategies and so on. But at the end of the day, it's kind of like in the Olympics, you practice, and then when you get in the race, you just got to run. You can't think, okay, put my foot here, do this. No, you just got to set, on you run as fast. You don't think about all the training, you just run. And I think when we get in a conversation, right, where we've done all that homework, and it could be like, okay, how do I remember all these things with DISC and that's not? I think, as you were talking, one of the things that you could go in the conversation with is just saying, my intent.
Yes.
More than the technique. And this is, again, where we are superior than AI, because AI can only deal with an intent when we tell it what our intent is. And then it can shape up words, it can shape a paragraph, it can do
But what prompts you're using, exactly.
all these things that are amazing, but what it can't do is communicate it in an emotional way that I grab your head, your heart, and your hands so that when I'm done, you're like, dog, we got to do that. We got to put this out. So AI can't do that. It may be able to say some pretty poetry, but it still takes a human to express it in a way. And so I think the idea of that intent, right, which is carrying that emotional piece and really helping people to feel you, because you talk about that in the book too, is that people may not remember everything that you talk about, but when you're done, they do remember how you made them feel.
That's so true. I want to say one thing as a caveat, though, Gerald. In some of my training, what I've also noticed is people are, when they're feeling like they have the permission to be who they are, and they have the ability to speak their voice and their truth, what I encourage them to do is keep in their mind, or maybe they have a journal they could write this down in, is how often do I speak in a way where it sounds like I'm complaining versus speaking in a way to show how productive, how profitable we could be, how much more effective we could be. Because in someone else's mind, it might sound like a complaint when in reality it's not. Right. So I say, keep that in your mind, because if you're speaking in a way where all they quote unquote hear are the things that we are not doing as an organization versus all the things that we could be taking advantage of, the opportunities we could be doing, then, you know, that's where framing is important. That's where you could say, hey, I'm going to speak my truth, but I got to make sure the message is going to be delivered in a way that is received in a manner that I want them to receive it, so that we can move forward and be productive. So I always encourage people, hey, this week, did I say 10 things that I believe were framed in a way that they can look at it as me helping the advanced organization? And maybe there might be one thing that they can say, we haven't done that as well. Let's make sure we're attentive to that and make those changes. So I let people know, keep a journal, write out what you're saying, write out what's being shared or how things are being received, so that when you do speak, you have the history there to show that you're able to do that consistently. Yes. So write it down, get a journal, get some use your phone if you have to, but make sure you're being consistent in writing down the notes that validate who you are into what voice you have, so you show up that way every time.
Exactly. Well, you know, as we get ready to land this, I got a couple more questions for you. And then one is, you know, how should individuals or organizations adapt their voice and culture strategies to maintain productivity with this speak framework in mind, right? What kind of things can they adjust in their voice and their strategies and so on?
Well, I think that's a great question, Gerald. And the biggest thing that I would say is don't get so married to what you've got established as your system that you're not flexible enough to grow with the needs of your people.
Yeah.
And for a lot of HR leaders, it could be, well, I just implemented this plan, or I put this in place. Well, now let's go back and do another survey, or let's go back and ask different type of questions, or let's go back and bring up a different scenario, because our goal in the HR space is to make sure that our people are thriving and growing. We don't want turnover, right? Because what happens with turnover, it could be 2.5, 3 times the amount to bring another person in to fill that role. And so we want people to feel like they're here, but at the same time, we don't want them just to be filling the seat. We want them to feel like they're owning that position, that they're growing to where they're becoming more what we call the inner entrepreneur, the entrepreneur spirit.
Yeah.
And if you do this from a perspective of, let us continue to evaluate our systems, our strategy, our growth plans, then that's what's going to be best for your people. Now, I do want to put this out to say, don't be reactive and you want to change it every week. No, you've got to have something in place long enough to know if it really works.
Right.
And if it's working, then you tweak it. If it's not working, throw it out and start something different. But you've got to get a true sense, the true heartbeat of where your people are. And my encouragement would be, Gerald, and this is going to sound different. I was a father coaching my son in basketball, but when he got to high school, his coach said some things. I felt like he said the same thing that I did, but guess what? It wasn't Dad, it was another voice. And so what I encourage companies to do is maybe bring in an outside resource. Not to say it has to be me, although I hope so, but let us take a peek at your organization. Let us take a pulse of your organization. Right. If it's in alignment with what you're already doing, then you're on the right track. Right. But if it's not, be willing to make some adjustments.
Yeah. And it's always wise to have, and again, I call my advisors, I say, I'm always looking for an advisor who is a tour guide. I don't want agents, right? I don't want someone who says they've been there. They might have done something. They've been on a podcast here or there. They've written a paper, but they don't have the skinning knees, rubber to the road experience where they've done it many times. And when I come to them, they can go, like if it's a tour guide and I say, hey, I want to climb Kilimanjaro, and they're like, well, you're not going to do it this year.
Right.
Because you need a year to prepare. Well, okay. And the travel agent would just says, here's a brochure, have a good trip, right? And he like fall off the cliff. But a tour guide who's been there, he look and go, okay, you got to lose weight, you got to adjust, you got to get fit, you need these kind of clothes, you got to go shop here, you need to live at this elevation for a while.
Exactly.
So just, that's what I want. I want someone who's going to be able to give me that kind of advice because they've been there many times. And, and I think what's really cool about you and Danny is that you guys have been there many times in the various aspects of your life. And now you have the company and the book and the processes and things that you guys have done together as twins, yet you stand individually as human beings and fathers and sons and making things happen. But you're tour guides in your approach to life and what you guys have done. And so where can people learn more about you guys, learn more about, get your book or your course or other or work with you or hire you to help come in and talk to their organizations of any size?
Well, thank you for that question, Gerald. The best thing I would say is connect with us on LinkedIn. You can find us there through David Suk Brown, that's S-U-K Brown, or Danny Suk Brown. You can also go to our websites, Meetup, Meetup, MEETUP.com, or DSBleadershipgroup.com. Go on Amazon, get our books, get our journals, listen to our 2 podcast programs. Go to one of my favorite episodes that features Gerald on it. And then you'll be able to see our work and what we're doing. But yeah, definitely we'd love to hear from you. Find us on LinkedIn, send us a message that way. That might be the best way to do it.
Excellent. Well, Danny, Dave.
It happens all the time.
That is really funny. I don't know why that happened, but okay. Dave, this has been an amazing conversation. Again, you guys have written a really cool book. I really enjoyed it. It is packed full of knowledge and wisdom and research so that you can hang your hat on what you guys said. You're not just making it up. You've actually lived this. You've researched it. It's peer reviewed. And thank you so much for being on the Productivity Smarts podcast.
Thank you, Gerald, for having me. Such an honor.
If you're enjoying the content and finding it valuable, we would appreciate it if you could take a moment and leave us a review. Your feedback is important to us and helps us reach a wider audience. If you leave us a 5-star review, it would mean the world to us. Not only does it help us improve the podcast, but it also helps us attract more sponsors and grow our community. Thank you again for your support and for listening to the Productivity Smarts podcast.
Thank you for tuning in to Productivity Smarts, where we help you achieve your goals and live your best life. We hope you've gained valuable insights and actionable strategies to boost your productivity and increase your happiness and fulfillment. Remember to apply what you've learned and keep striving towards your goals. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to our podcast for more inspiring episodes and expert advice from our host, Gerald J. Leonard. Until next time, keep pushing forward and unleashing your productivity smarts.